Trade plays an important role in the American economy and in North Carolina's economy. Just how important? Our next guest will help us answer that question. Bryan Riley is the J. Van Andel Senior Policy Analyst in Trade Policy at the Center for International Trade and Economics at the Heritage Foundation. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here at John Locke today.
The trade we've talked about for a number of years being important to the American economy and the North Carolina economy. You've actually taken a look at some of the details of just how important it is. What should people know?
Well, every year at Heritage, we produce a report called the Index of Economic Freedom, where we rank about 180 countries around the world, look at their policies, compare them to U.S. policies. And I think a lot of people probably won't be surprised to learn that countries that are more open, that have more freedom, are more prosperous than those that are closed. And I think one famous example of that is if you look at a map of the Korean Peninsula at night, and you can just see the line. South Korea is all lit up, and North Korea, there's nothing there. So I think a lot of people here in the United States instinctively understand more freedom is a good thing. That's what we were founded on. Well, it turns out the same goes for trade policies. Countries that are more open to international trade and investment are more prosperous. And it's a little bit more controversial to talk about trade policy sometimes than just the big picture economic freedom. But if you look at a state like North Carolina, since 1994, when the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, took effect, the state's added about 50% to its manufacturing output. Its economy's 2.5 times bigger. You've added about 1 million new jobs. Now, are those all because of NAFTA? No, of course not. But kind of the world President Reagan envisioned back in the 80s, where there are few barriers to international trade and investment, creating opportunities here in the United States and creating stronger economies around the world so we have more export markets. That's kind of the direction that I think we need to continue to move.
Now, some people are going to hear us and say, wait a minute, ever since NAFTA came in, we've heard about textile mills closing down. Ross Perot was right about the giant sucking sound of jobs to Mexico. What's the response to people who think that free trade's not all it's cracked up to be?
Well, there's a grain of truth to that. Let's face it, North Carolina doesn't have as many textile and apparel jobs as it did in 1993. It doesn't have as many furniture jobs as it did in 1993. Now, does that mean we want to turn back the clock to 93 and try and get those jobs back? I think that would really be a mistake. The benefits of trade are really similar to the benefits of new technologies. We can complain about the lost furniture jobs. We can complain about the lost Blockbuster jobs because nobody rents videos anymore. They download it or stream it. And I think it's a real big mistake to focus on one particular sector of the economy. Let's look overall what's going on. Overall, the state has hundreds of thousands of jobs that depend on exports. Many, many more jobs today depend on foreign investment that creates jobs for people here in North Carolina than jobs in the furniture or textile and apparel industries. We do need to have good policies from Washington, D.C. that makes it easy for people to find new jobs and easy for new industries to be created. I think that's what we need to encourage and not blame trade for problems that a lot of times are a result of economic problems created by politicians. But I really think it's important to emphasize the fact that with trade and new technology, there are winners and losers. How can we have an environment that allows for the creation of more winners and bigger winners so that overall everybody's better off?
That is the voice of Bryan Riley, who is a senior policy analyst at the Heritage Foundation. You mentioned an interesting word, winners, which is a word that our president likes to use quite a bit. But President Trump has not always been a fan, at least on the campaign trail and in his spoken remarks, of free trade. Is this something that has been an impediment to making the case for free trade, the fact that the White House has not always been as vocal for free trade?
Well, the President of the United States has the bully pulpit, and people hear what he has to say. And increasingly in the Republican Party, more Republicans are skeptical of free trade than they were before President Trump came onto the scenes. I think that's because it's an issue where In many cases, people don't have strong opinions. I'm a Republican president says it's bad. Well, it must be bad. So part of what we do at the Heritage Foundation is try and educate people about the economic facts so that they can make up their own minds. I think the positives from the Trump administration are twofold. First of all, their goal is to have a stronger, faster growing economy that creates jobs. And to me, protectionist trade barriers that would restrict our freedom would undermine that goal. And I hope they understand this. And also, behind the rhetoric, a lot of times is a focus on opening foreign markets to U.S. exports. Oh, it's not fair, is the rhetoric. And in many cases, they're right. Foreign countries do have barriers to our exports. So if the focus is how can we encourage other countries to embrace economic freedom so we have more exports and more opportunities, I think that's constructive. The idea that trade is bad and we're losing, I certainly disagree with that. Trade, by definition, consists of millions of mutually beneficial transactions, win-win transactions. It's not a win-lose like some people seem to think.
When you have a chance to chat with people and share this type of information, do you find that most people, once they hear the facts, are willing to go along with the notion that free trade's good?
Well, most people are. There are just some facts that some of us in the policy community know and assume that everybody knows. For example, U.S. manufacturing output's never been higher. And they hear, well, we don't make anything anymore. It's simply not true. We make more than we ever have. Coming out of the recession in the 2000s, we certainly could do much better. But when you throw those numbers at them, and when you typically, if somebody has an example close to home. So I was just in Alabama last week, for example. And they had a Mercedes factory, Hyundai factory, Honda factory, and they understood the importance of having good policies to attract foreign investment, and were really concerned about the direction that we may be going with NAFTA negotiations. If those go south, they're concerned they might not get any more auto plants in the future. Or here in North Carolina, there's so many success stories of companies that have been able to export, or the huge amount of jobs, millions or hundreds of thousands of jobs that depend on foreign investment. And those are typically good jobs. They're not to take anything away from the furniture or textile and apparel industries, but the new jobs typically pay more than the old jobs. The catch is that a lot of times they need some training and education to equip people for those jobs. So that's part of the challenge that I think we face.
Well, in the brief time that we have remaining, do you think this is the type of issue that we're going to continue to need to have education about moving forward?
It's an ongoing issue. There are always special interests in D.C. who try and get special treatment. And all free trade is about is really not giving people special treatment, making it so that when people listen to this show, when you earn your paychecks, when I earn my paycheck, I get to decide how to spend my dollars, not somebody in D.C. based on who's got the best lobbyists. That's going to be an ongoing concern. I think the best way to address that is to have good trade agreements, not just any trade agreements, but good trade agreements that increase our freedom and increase economic opportunities here in the United States and also around the world. It's kind of that Reagan vision for the future that I think is so important, looking to the future instead of looking to the past.